to all of you. Welcome to our conversation today. And as you know, this is a social audio experience. And what that means is it's not a passive experience for you as listeners to this topic. As we go through this conversation with Christiaan Hattingh, who's the MD at AWPower, you can raise your hand and I will bring you up onto the stage. And you can ask your questions if you have any. If something in the conversation sparks a question, you're more than welcome to do that. This is, as I said, social audio is all about co-creating a listening experience, and it enables us, no matter where we are in the world, to be part of this conversation, and that's really great. So just for those of you that perhaps don't know myself and what we do at Future Work IQ, so basically we spend our time helping leadership teams come to grips with global future megatrends and then figure out how they can redesign their businesses in order to remain relevant as a result of those global megatrends. Something that is really huge, that is playing out at the moment and will play out for the considerable future, is obviously what we need to do about climate change. So what we're doing at Future Work IQ at the moment is we're focusing a lot of attention on teaching teams how to improve their climate literacy, and in the process of doing that, be able to understand what they need to do in order to reinvent their businesses. Now, obviously, you know, solar energy and the renewable space is a very important conversation when we talk about the climate, because we are needing as a global economy to decouple from fossil fuels. And in order to do that, we need to obviously substitute that with energy that comes from renewable sources that doesn't create the problem that oil, gas, and coal obviously does. So that's the reason we're having this particular conversation. But I do encourage you to please follow me on LinkedIn, because we have regular conversations around this. What's coming up very soon is a conversation that we're going to have with a scientist who's working in Greenland, where they're observing what's happening in Greenland and the impact that is going to have on business around the world. So these are the kind of conversations that we have. But we want to turn our attention to today's conversation, which is all about transitioning to solar energy and everything that you need to know about that. Now, in the South African context, we'll talk about that in a second. This is a hot topic, but it is a hot topic elsewhere in the world as well. So, Christiaan Hattingh, I want to welcome you and thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. Maybe we can start off just with a little bit about your background. How did you end up at AWPower?
Thanks, Peter. Welcome to all the listeners. Thanks for having me over. Yeah, looking at the situation we have ourselves in, back in 2015, AWPower was formed from our core business at the time, was ERP and HR and payroll business that, with load shedding, meant that we weren't able to work in the office. And with a couple of engineers that were employed in the business, they said, listen, just let's take it upon ourselves to solve this problem. Engineers being problem solvers, they were up for the task, and this sort of, due to the circumstances, forced us to think outside the box. And I almost want to say it became a passion, which then eventually turned into a profession. And we were founded in 2015, and from there, very quickly had to adapt to the circumstances and very quickly had to learn our way around the solar energy business. Specifically, being in the renewables sector, we don't look at wind ourselves. It's purely focused to rooftop solar energy. And it's a nice space to be in. I think it's nice to have seen it grown over the last couple of years. It's accelerated definitely at a very quick pace, I would say, the last 2 years. We've, from the inception of the company until now, I actually met up with a client that approached us way in the beginning, saying that he had this, with load shedding, he had the problem, and he wanted to address this load shedding problem that he had, but at the same time also have savings incorporated into it. And at the time, the technology for him wasn't at a level that he was finding it acceptable. And approached us again now last week, and I visited him now on Monday, and he said that he believes that the technology is at a point now where for him it would satisfy his needs. And obviously with the load shedding at the moment, he just said, listen, yes, savings is the one part, but also sitting without power is just, it's not acceptable. And he doesn't believe that it's going to get any better. And certainly I think most other people also know that although what we see in the media, we have problems. And the best way to address it is to think of ways that including battery backup is one way to address it, but also to incorporate solar with that. And also for the bigger picture, it's maybe South Africa's drive towards renewables and specifically solar isn't maybe the same as for the global picture, where we also, we want to get away from fossil fuels. Necessarily, our drive is due to Eskom. It's an exciting space to be in, and I think we're in a good spot now with technology and also with the adoption. Solar is also, it's new, and for most people, and these kind of talks that we're having now is very important to educate people. The more you know, the more you can make better informed decisions on what you want to achieve over the long-term picture.
Great. So we're gonna get into this. I just want to mention to everybody that's joined us, for those of you that are just coming in now, remember that this is a social audio experience, and what that means is we would encourage you to participate in the conversation. How you do that, if you hear anything that sparks your interest, or you have a question to ask or an observation to make, please raise your hand, and I will bring you up onto the stage, and we can have a quick conversation with that. I have a list of questions myself that I want to ask Christiaan, but that doesn't stop us from going where you want to go. This is a co-creation experience, which is quite interesting. So I was wondering where to start this conversation, and I want to say to you, Christiaan, I noticed that on AWPower's website, they have a case study. This is what I wanted to ask you before I get there. So at the moment, if you think of the clients that you guys are dealing with the most, are they mostly coming from are they residential or homeowners that are coming to you, or is most of the traffic coming from landlords, things like malls and office buildings, etc.? What has been the experience so far for you guys specifically?
So we advertise ourselves as residential and commercial solar experts, and a very valid question. It's a mixed bag. Residential will always be a hot topic. For us, we deal with a lot of residentials, but commercials, the uptake has been very interesting. That you asked that. I would say the last 6 months, there's always been commercial projects in the mix. And people approaching us to invest for, looking at a big commercial property with a lot of roof space. You've got landlords that own commercial properties, and they've got these units that they lease out. Their plan is to reduce their electricity bill, and we'll get to the topics where we discuss the different types of systems. But they want to invest in what we refer to as grid-tied solar, which is just purely there for savings. There's no energy security or backup like a genset or batteries involved with those kind of systems. And obviously with the pressure that landlords and commercial properties, offices, shopping malls, etc. under is, they've got these properties to lease, and with the pressure that load shedding has introduced, it means that if they're not able to operate their business, they're losing out on valuable income. And if they can't have their income, then they sort of get to a point where they say, listen, is it viable to stay here or not? If I'm able to get to operate my business doing load shedding with my landlord providing me a generator or solar with battery backup, then and we can sort of meet halfway, then I'd rather take my business there. And so the uptake from commercial, residential has always been there, and I think the COVID has forced a work from home policy for a lot of people. It seems to be returning to some sort of extent. But from my point of view, I'm glad that the world has been put into a position to rethink how they want to do things. Some businesses thrive not having an office, others require it. So residential, working from home, if you can't work because of load shedding, then that obviously means that you have to invest in some sort of system. So like I said, residential will always be there, but commercial uptake has definitely seen a massive increase. And to answer your question, yes, landlords, offices saying that their needs, they just want their admin to run. They can survive without their air cons, for example, but they want their computers to run, they want the internet to run, they want their phone lines to be up. And I see we've seen a big increase in those clients.
So I see Nick Headley is with us here as well. Nick and I have been chatting on Twitter about these topics, and I recently shared a tweet with him. If you go onto the satellite view over the Sandton area, for example, in Johannesburg, and you just fly over the area, you'll notice that there are so many places that now have rooftop solar on. It seems to be the incidence of that seems to be increasing quite rapidly, which is really interesting. Just for everybody that's possibly listening that's not based in South Africa, you'll notice that Christiaan has been mentioning a word that may sound unfamiliar to you. It's something called load shedding. So what's happened in South Africa is basically the coal grid is collapsing as a result of maintenance issues and all kinds of other administrative issues that are related to the utility that provides power in South Africa. And so what happens is, at the moment, for example, we have about 7.5 or some places 8 hours that don't have power throughout the day. They just don't have the capacity to provide power that is needed in South Africa. So what's happened in the South African context is we've had lots of people looking to how they can actually break their reliance on the utility that's meant to be providing the power that we have. But this is a good thing because, a lot of people may say, Peter, are you crazy? What do you mean by a good thing? In essence, we have to move away from fossil fuels. And, in the South African context, we have we are the dirtiest provider of electricity on the African continent. And that has to change. So this situation that's happened with our utility is very similar to what's happened with COVID, actually, globally, because what it's given us is an opportunity to reinvent what we need to do. So listen, I want to get into the residential situation. I know you guys on your website, you've got a house as a case study, and I think this house, the website says, has been off the grid since 2016. Just talk to me a little bit about that home. What is, if you think of the off the grid solar PV or the battery tied solar PV or the grid tied solar PV, which of those is that house?
Yeah, very good that we're bringing that up because if we say off grid, let's take it back to when we installed this at the time. So City of Cape Town, and any municipality for that matter, requires if you install any solar on your rooftop, they want to know of it. They need to know that if you're going to connect with their grid, have a grid tied system that runs parallel with their grid, they need to know of it because it's their infrastructure that you pay for on a monthly basis for them to maintain. So this off-grid house, defined off-grid, is not in actual fact off-grid. It's an off-grid system in the way that it works. This specific inverter with its batteries and panels is either when it operates grid connected completely, so you don't use your solar power at the time and your batteries and from your panels, or it is completely disconnected from the grid. So being off-grid is when we registered the system, it was registered as an off-grid system because it is not physically grid connected. But the term off-grid is a bit of a swear word in our circles, in the fact that a lot of people come to us saying that they want to go off the grid, and my first question always is that what is your definition of off-grid? Does it mean that you want to be less reliant on the grid? Do you want to reduce your monthly bill to a minimum and still be grid connected and have it as a backup? not have to sever your connection completely and not have a grid connection coming in from council? Or does it mean that you actually want to completely disconnect? You don't want any connection from Eskom or your local municipality at all. If you're going to opt for the latter, it means that if you don't have any backup in place, the cost implication for a system like that, and also just a lifestyle implication, I think it needs to be understood. First of all, if you do go off grid in the true sense of the word, you have to account for the bad days. Yes, we live in a sunny country, but in Cape Town, we've got in the winter, days on end where it continuously rains. And although you still do get generation from your system, it's just at a reduced capacity. And as we all know, winter in Cape Town can be cold at times. And with this cold winter, we tend to want to snug up and run heaters in the house, and you boil the kettle, and your consumption, or people have underfloor heating, your consumption obviously goes up, but your generation at the time of the year is not at its best. So if you're like I said, if you completely off grid, it means that you might run into the risk of depleting your batteries and having no power. So what do you then have as a backup? You can either invest in a generator, or an alternative could also be wind, but that gets a bit more complicated. But people don't want to, specifically also in a residential environment, necessarily use generators. We are trying to shy away from using noisy equipment, pollution that's involved with that also. But what I'm getting to is that off-grid is very expensive because you have to oversize your system to make up for the periods during the year where the generation is not sufficient.
So Christiaan, I know we're going to go on to the rest and the house itself. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that totally off the grid. In other words, you're not connected to any utility. The challenge there is basically the storage of electricity. Is that correct? Am I hearing you correctly?
100%. The storage there. So yeah, this case study, just to correct it, yes, it is an off-grid system, but this house always had the grid as a backup. So from a consumption point of view, from what the monthly spend was, it was considered to be off-grid in the terms, but it wasn't in the true sense of the word a complete off-grid system where they had to store their own energy and be reliant on, or not be reliant on sort of Cape Town to provide them power.
I'm with you. So now my next question before we go on to the other systems that you have and this house, because it's a great example to actually talk about all these different things. So in your view, in order for true off the grid to happen, what advances in technology has to happen? Is it batteries that have to become cheaper, or what is it that needs to happen?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you've mentioned, storage is the main thing. What is your storage platform? It's your batteries. So you've got, if you look at a system in its simplest form, the components involved is you've got your inverter, which is obviously the equipment that takes your power from your batteries and gives it inverts it into a usable form to use in your household. If we look at power in the house. For those that don't know, you plug in your appliances into your wall sockets, and what's the output that you get for these appliances, or the input into the appliances is your typically between 220 and 240 volts AC. Now, looking at a system, the challenge is with the off-grid system is that if you've got all these components, you've got your inverter with your batteries and your panels, you need to make sure that it is sized according to your consumption pattern. Off-grid clients or people that want to live off-grid, they've got a very good understanding of what they use and when they use it. So now, when you have a system like this, you need to know that typically during the winter and the summer, you use on average 20 kilowatt hours a day, for example. And then if we have that information, the challenge with the off-grid system is that if you've got that information, you can say, okay, if your worst case scenario is that if you're using 25 kilowatt hours a day, make sure that you've got at least 30 kilowatt hours of storage.
Right.
You know, that's your on average what you have. But at the same time, also make sure that you've got ample solar to be able to replenish, to carry your load during the day, but also then charge up your batteries and have capacity to discharge at night and last until the next day for the cycle to repeat.
Right.
So yeah, the challenge is, like you say, is the capacity point to make this happen. The advances that I think that move people to going off grid is obviously, cost is a massive factor, but battery technology has for the last couple of years improved and become a lot more available and also cheaper.
Right.
We've moved from had farmers having lead acid batteries, for example, installed on their farms, to a point now where people are adopting lithium ion batteries, and that was very expensive at the time, back in the day, but it's become a lot more affordable as of late, and we're hoping that going forward that we still might see further reductions. But again, at the moment, the demand, it proves to be something that's going up at this stage.
Okay, so just before we carry on, I just want to mention to everybody that's listening, remember, you can raise your hand, you can pop up here and ask a question related to anything you've heard, or make an observation of your own. That's the whole intent behind this. So and also, if you want to see this house we're talking about, you can go to awpower.co.za and have a look at that. And you'll actually see the case study is there, and you can actually see the picture of the house. So, okay, so let's get back to the house. So where is the house at the moment?
So it's based in Glencairn.
No, sorry. I mean the energy system in the house. Where's that got to at the moment?
Do you mean for the specific? Apologies. Do you mean specifically for this case study, or
yes,
just in general the technology?
Specifically for this house, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it was initially this house was installed with lead acid batteries. Again, like I've mentioned, the technology that has changed over the years. It was initially installed with lead acid batteries, and that over time, people that have experience with lead acid batteries know that they don't last for a very long time, typically between 2, maybe max 4 years. So, throughout when the system was installed up until now, the case study goes on to say that, we've swapped their batteries for lithium. And the idea is that for the next 10 years, at least, that this house has been able to have a steady supply of solar coming into and also be able to store it. I think the biggest advancement for this house was just the conversion to lithium-ion batteries to store their energy.
Okay, interesting. All right, so we've discussed completely off the grid, and we understand that, and you basically have to have the batteries that you need to store the energy that you use, and a little plus a little extra. And at the moment, it's probably cost restrictive for most people to actually go that route. So let's talk about the other two. So you mentioned grid tied. So just help me a little bit with this. So when would you use the grid if you have a grid tied solar system?
Yeah, let's maybe touch on both. You can have a grid tied system that has batteries also. If you look at a hybrid inverter, it is considered a grid tied system because it does connect with the grid, but it can also then connect with batteries to provide you that total solution. So, looking at from a grid tied point of view, as I mentioned earlier with the commercials, the simplest form of adopting solar is to say, let's have install panels and connect that to an inverter, and then use that to supplement your electricity supply. Okay, so the concept behind a grid tied system without batteries is that you've got, when the grid is available, you've got a system that produces electricity, harvested from the sun, and it's used to then supplement your existing electricity. So basically, if you look at it from a usage point of view, is that during the day when the system runs, where you would normally, if you've got your kettle running in the house and you're drawing between 2 and 3 kilowatt, if you've got that amount of solar on your roof, you could potentially then use the solar to run off solar for that moment and not import, or then at least just import a little bit of Eskom electricity at that moment. Grid tied can also then involve, if you've got a grid tied system, you can say that I've got a lot of excess generation during the day. If you can't store that energy, the other it can get lost if you don't export it. And exporting is a topic that a lot of people still believe that it's something that's not allowed. Yes, it isn't allowed throughout the country. Some municipalities do not allow exporting of excess energy, but you are able to export instead of Cape Town. For example, if you've got a registered grid-tied system, you can ask them and opt for exporting and say to them, listen, I've got the system, I will have excess. Can we please apply for exporting? And they then install what we refer to as a bidirectional AMI meter that is able to measure power going, incoming power, but also power going out into the grid. And then on a monthly basis, obviously then able to record and bill you accordingly and then give you credits. We could refer to it as generation offset on your utility bill. So if you don't have batteries to store your energy, at least you have the ability to also export any excess. But now the other side of having a grid tied system is you can also have your late nowadays a lot of people know the brand SunSync or DEYE, DEYE. It's hybrid inverters that allow you to, if you don't have the funds to start with a complete system that has batteries, you can say, listen, let's start with panels and your inverter and run as a grid tied system. But if you've got the budget, let's incorporate batteries.
Right.
So if you've got a grid tied system that's got battery also that's battery tied, you're able to now, whatever you generate during the day, utilize in your house, but also store the energy to use later at night. And when there's load shedding or any power outages, you're able to then run your essentials. We refer to whatever's connected to your inverter that runs off the battery during power failure. We refer to that as your essentials. You're then able to run your essentials off your inverter for the duration, depending on the size of the capacity of your battery bank. You can then run your essentials for X amount of time. And that's typically, at this stage, people approaching us say, listen, I've either got budget to go for the full system for residents, or they say, listen, I don't have the money now, but my current situation means that I can't work during load shedding. Can we please install a battery backup that's able to expand with solar later on when we do have the budget?
Okay.
That's effectively the two systems that you get from a grid type point of view.
So can I ask you, like in your experience with the installations that you guys have been doing here in South Africa, what would you say is the most popular of the three?
The grid tied with the battery also incorporated.
Okay.
Again, like I said, and I'll keep continuing to mention this because it is something that we're trying to educate people. The buzzword being I want to go off grid is something we need to educate people and say, listen, off grid is maybe not the correct word, but you want to be, you want to reduce your monthly bill as far as possible, given with the amount of budget that you have to that you can work with. Now, the majority of people approach us saying that they've got they want to have solar installed because they've got a high monthly bill. They spend a lot of money on electricity on them, and at the same time also have the issue with load shedding. So we can always, if you really want to go off grid, we can say, listen, it is possible, but just be aware of the costs involved. But there's good news to this. You maybe came to us with the idea that going solar, going off grid is going to cost a lot of money. Now we've got good news for you. Let's have a look at your requirements. If you want to reduce your monthly bill, but also at the same time have your energy security, let's design a system that is grid tied, but also has got battery backup. Yes, maybe it means off grid for you is to reduce your bill, but there's, like I said, the massive cost implication just doesn't justify that. So majority of the people that we install for are these grid tied hybrid systems that they always have the grid as a backup. Like I said, then you don't have to oversize your system to account for the bad weather days. And you have your backup, maybe a week or two during the year. You've got bad weather where during that period you import the rest from utility if it's available. And that just makes up for systems that are a lot more affordable for most people, I would say.
So I want to switch the conversation in a second to talk about electric vehicles and how they fit into this whole system that or these systems that you've been describing for us here. But I just want to mention something before we go to that. I was just reading something about well, it's not a small town. I mean, I think it has about 700,000 residents or so, or maybe a little less. I may have that figure wrong, but about 25 kilometers inland from a place called Fort Myer, which was severely damaged by Hurricane Ian. They've got a community there. I think if I must just check my facts, but I think it's got about 2,000 houses. But what they have there is a system which was run off a solar farm that they had, and all the cabling and everything to go into the homes from that system was put underground. Even their internet services, everything was underground. So there's no overhead power lines or anything like that. And obviously that hurricane moved through that area. I mean, it came right over them. It actually did uproot some trees, etc. But actually, they were a small town that was able to remain with their power grid up, whereas everywhere else, because of the way electricity was distributed, power lines came down, trees knocked those over, and so they lost power, whereas these guys didn't. Some of their roofs were damaged. So I just want to ask you, before we go to EV, let's just think into the future. So if South Africa managed to use the money that's come from the US and the UK and Europe to transition away from fossil fuels, and we were able to build utility size solar farms and wind farms, etc., would there still be, because one of the guys at this little town outside Fort Myers said this is what he did, so I just want to check what you think about this. Would there still be a need for people to have solar systems on their homes or in their offices? What do you think?
Yeah, interesting question. I mean, these microgrids, yes, let's say if it was possible for us to move in that direction and get that implemented for certain areas, it all depends on which route we take now, and that's where this whole process is so important. You can't act out of the frustration of the situation and say, listen, I'm going to invest into this and into this route, and 5 years down the line you notice that, listen, well, maybe it wasn't such a good idea to invest in my own solar, because we're in a situation where the area that I stay in, they've now got approval for a microgrid. They're going to put a big solar farm up here. There's battery storage also in place. And now all of a sudden I'm not connected to my local municipality, but I've got, I'm going to have to pay if I want to get part of this program. I'm going to have to pay fees. Now all of a sudden, whatever I've got on my roof is it's an investment that effectively has lost its value. Yeah, interesting question. I still believe from if you just think it from a logical point of view, there's so much roof space. Each and every home, yes, not that everyone's got ideal roof space and orientations for solar, yes, but still at the same time, most people do have the ability to harness sunlight or solar, throughout the day to use and utilize. The thinking back from just a logical point of view, if you've got the ability to reduce the load, your own consumption, you still, I would say, you still, it's still a benefit. There's still a benefit to it. You're contributing from your part to reduce the reliance from another source providing that power that you are using. Does that answer your question? I mean, does it make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, it was just a thought that crossed my mind. Nick and others, if you do want to have ask a question, you're more than just welcome to come up here. I wanted to just ask you one other thing before we talk about. Let me just get Nick up here quickly. Right, Nick, I'm going to allow you to speak, so you are popping up. I just wanted to ask you the direction that Elon Musk and Tesla and these guys are going with the roof tiles that are actually solar panels, for the lack of another word. Do you see that becoming a big thing in future, or is that a way off still, do you think?
Oh, well, it depends on the cost. Again, the cost is the biggest drive for us. If the technology is proven over time to be reliable and the cost thereof is also palatable for people, then I mean, sure. There's a lot of questions in South Africa from residential clients saying that they want to have Tesla battery power walls installed in the houses, and can they get that? Can they get a quote for it? Because they love Elon's vision, they love the Tesla product, they know it's a good product. And yes, it is a good product, but the big picture for us, as installers, is that we need to be able to provide our clients with, number one, a product that's good quality, that's going to last the amount of years that it's advertised to do. Secondly, at also the cost that's affordable for most people. But then and thirdly, the most important thing is after sales support is crucial. If and things do go wrong, it's a fact. I mean, it's human-made products. Not all of them can last the entire duration without complications or problems. A product like Tesla, Powerwalls, for example, there's a very limited amount of people allowed to work on them because they're quite complex. You have to have certification, and also just availability of spare parts is always an issue. So yes, tiles like that can work if we are able to adopt that technology at a consistent, able to consistently supply it, but also at an affordable price. Then sure, great. I mean, a big concern for people is they install these panels on their roofs, and it's aesthetically not very pleasing. If you look in the States, they've got very strict rules on what you're allowed to install. It's not allowed to be street facing if you can help it. It must be black panels to match the aesthetics of the state. If you've got roof tiles that blend in, yes, I mean, that obviously solves that issue. But again, it must come down to, is it affordable? Is it available? Is there support for it?
Interesting. Christiaan, I've really enjoyed your insights on this. You can see that you guys are in this game and you have a lot of expertise. Nick, if you unmute, question or comment?
Thanks, Peter, and thanks, Christiaan. Yeah, interesting and important discussion. I just wanted to ask, as far as I know, Eskom is working on a revised sort of, what would you call it, framework for feed-in tariffs. So obviously Cape Town allows that now, but I understand it's not really a very attractive incentive because the tariffs you get, the payments you get for feeding into the grid are very low. Do you know, I mean, any idea of where this scheme is heading and what would be a sort of attractive feed-in tariff to incentivize massive take-up? And I mean, just looking at how successful something similar like that was in Vietnam, where they added nearly 10 gigawatts in a single year just from having an incentive scheme that offered really good feed-in tariff rates. So this clearly should be an opportunity for South Africa. Any thoughts on how it could be structured or what a good feed-in tariff might be?
Yeah, a valid question, Nick. It's been asked a lot from our point of view, and it is a bit of a controversial topic because looking from this whole process from the administration point of view, we discussed it this morning also. If you look at South Africa, sort of Cape Town, where we do the bulk of our business, I've also dealt with City Power in Johannesburg. That they also, let's call that sort of Cape Town, their SSEG, small scale embedded generation. It's just the acronym for going. If you want to install solar, you have to go through the SSEG approval program. But sort of Cape Town they've got a very streamlined SSEG application program that City Power, for example, have adopted and said that they've based their process to get solar installed on City of Cape Town's process, but from and that also then includes your selling of excess energy back into the grid and getting compensated for that. But City Power, for example, have the issue that they're not allowed to, at this stage, to they can't or give credit to users that export because they've got a billing problem. So if you think about it this way, the first step is if you've got the ability to generate excess energy, we know that importing or buying energy from the utility, that's easy. We've got prepaid meters, or some people have postpaid meters, your old conventional meters that they receive a bill every month that you've imported X amount of kilowatt hours or units. Okay, but now if you export that, the metering involved to accurately capture that and to be able to report on that on a monthly basis, not everyone is up to scratch with that. Now, City of Cape Town does have that in place. So if you go through the hoops, be it residential, commercial, to export excess energy, there's an application process. You first of all register your system, and then you tick that you want to export. You either say to them you don't want to export excess energy, and then you stay on your prepaid meter that you have installed. Or then if you want to export your energy, you then tick that box, just those two options. And then you also have to go to the department that is responsible for quoting your change of supply. So they have to now come to your property and have a look at what you have in place. Do you have a street-facing boundary box that they are able to install the meter in and have access to without having to enter your property? If you tick all those boxes and you have your bidirectional AMI meter installed, that bidirectional means that can, like I said earlier, it can measure power coming in but also going out. If you have that all installed, great. Now they can measure your exported energy. Now your question is, what would be the ideal compensation model? Obviously, if it's 1-to-1, that would be perfect. If let's take the example, you receive your monthly utility bill that's got your rates and taxes on it. You've got your water, you've got your electricity. Yes, we all know if it's not prepaid meter, you've paid 500 Rand or 2,000 Rand or whatever it is on electricity, and if you imported X amount. But ideally speaking, at the moment, you get about 1 Rand back for every kilowatt hour if it's residential or then commercial. You get 1 Rand back for every kilowatt hour that you export. It was always a bit less, but they've said for the next couple of years, they're adding 25 cents to that just to sort of incentivize it. You get put onto a service charge that's a little bit more expensive than your normal service charge on a monthly basis, just to sort of, for them, because there's the metering, they have to now measure every month how much you export. So there's just that little extra service charge on that. And like I said, you get 1 Rand back. Now, that's obviously not ideal because from our point of view, if you look at the investment, the ideal is to focus on self-consumption. Self-consumption means that if you've got a solar system installed, you want to utilize your solar energy that's being generated during the day and also being stored in battery storage. You want to utilize that as fast as possible, first, and then export whatever you have excess. Now, at the moment, from our calculations with our clients over the years, it doesn't make sense. If you're a residential client, you've got single-phase power, which the majority of people do have. If you include that 10,000, normally, roughly speaking, is about 10,000 Rand VAT inclusive to have a meter installed if all the boxes are ticked. You've got a street-facing boundary box, like I said, for example. Okay, if you've got that installed, and you've got single-phase power, that cost to convert to exporting energy. Because of the limitations that's being imposed on SSEG processes, there's limits on what you can install. And that has changed over the years. City of Cape Town, for example, have changed it. What's allowed on rooftops, what is allowed to be connected to the grid, what is allowed to be exported to the grid. If you export, like I said, in a single phase configuration, that R1 you get back doesn't make sense. So there's, like you rightly so, like you said, that incentive at the moment isn't enough to get people to go that route and export energy commercially. Or let's start with three-phase homes. That's your Constantia homes, or you get the bigger mansions. They have three-phase power, and on there it makes financial sense to export energy. But still, you get your R1 back. So ideally, in an ideal world, if we were able to receive back at whatever we pay for the importing fee in tariff, if we can get that back for exporting, that would have been perfect. Even better if we were able to now, on a monthly basis, if we export more than what we use, we become a net generator. It's clearly stipulates in the regulations that from sort of Cape Town's point of view that you're not allowed to be a net generator. You must be a net consumer. That means that you are, the moment you generate more on a rand value than what you import, they're going to tell you, listen, we can't have this because we can't give you money back. So take it even further. The ideal would have been if we were able to actually receive money back into our pockets, maybe money to offset our entire utility bill, to pay for our rates and taxes. That would have been perfect. But unfortunately, we're not there yet. I know the mayor of City of Cape Town said that they are looking to, for commercially as a start, get people to incentivize your exporting a bit more. Get people to install solar, export it, reduce the load from our dependency from the Eskom grid by getting commercial properties to do that. How do you further incentivize it? Give them more, give more credit. Even hell, if you can get money back into the pocket, that would have been perfect. But again, we're not there yet. But it looks like City of Cape Town, over the years, are moving forward. And I really hope that working with Eskom, that we are able to, at least on countrywide, are able to adopt a kind of model like that. I hope that answers your question. 1-to-1, or even more, if we can get money back into our pocket and be net generators, that would be the perfect scenario.
Perfect, thanks.
Christiaan, this made me think of something which I want to ask you. If you just think of what we need to do, which is to basically decouple from fossil fuels and move to renewable, and now we're talking solar specifically, what do you think is the biggest bottleneck at the moment for mass adoption? Is it the cost of these systems, or what is it?
No, I wouldn't say cost. It's the bottleneck is just, I almost want to say politically, the adoption of renewables, stems from what is allowed. What are we allowed to adopt to solve this problem? In other countries, they said, listen, we've clearly got a problem. How are we going to solve this? Let's implement renewables in a massive scale to solve this. We, unfortunately, as a country, have a bit more complex situation in the fact that, we've got Eskom, unfortunately, in its position, financially needs to recover costs. And the problem and the challenge that we have is to find a medium where each of us, be it from a residential point of view, be it from a commercial point of view, be it from an industrial point of view, large scale, if we can, each and every one, connect and contribute from our point of view and alleviate or reduce the dependency from the grid, that obviously would make a massive difference. But the other end of the spectrum is that there's this massive cost that they have to be recuperated or recovered somehow. And yes, the adoption of solar is going to solve that to a certain extent. But now, how the other thing that's also in the media is, the service charge that Eskom wants to now perhaps increase, and then also the variable that if you look at what you're paying for your kilowatt hours that you consume on a daily basis, if at the moment maybe the model doesn't make sense, it isn't sustainable. So it is a topic that it's got a lot of time that needs to be invested into it. From our point of view, the ideal would be for everyone to adopt solar. Yes, the cost implication to adopt solar. Yes, as we know that if you have to outright buy these systems, residentially or commercially, industrial, there's a cost to it. The more people can install, the more we can reduce the cost. It all comes down to the adoption of it. If we can adopt solar as a country at a faster rate, perhaps it would mean that we could reduce the costs of importing panels, importing inverters. We do have locally manufactured goods, but unfortunately, I think at the rate that we need to expand, we would have to import these goods, inverters, panels, batteries, etc. And the uptake of that would definitely determine the price. But at the same time, the way that's if we are allowed to do it, that's probably the most important factor that we don't have control of, and we just have to wait and see, I suppose.
Francis, you've popped on stage. If you could unmute and ask your question or make an observation.
Hey, how's it, guys? I think the tough thing for us is we are South Africa. So we look at it from the perspective of South Africa, and we have a very reactive way of looking at solar. But if we had to look at the way it could work in the bigger picture, the ideal, how would that be something that because for me, solar is something that whether I was living in South Africa or whether I was living in Iceland, solar would be the thing that I'd want to have, because it's a cleaner way of getting energy. We get away from coal, we get away from maybe not the supplier, because the grid is a great thing. I think the infrastructure of grids in countries is incredible, but I'm trying to figure out how do we harness that everybody can be incentivized, like you were saying earlier, to bring solar on, and the grid can benefit in the long run. I mean, in the Karoo, we have the biggest space where the sun always shines, so there is the ability for us to harness solar worldwide so that, we can move away from fossil fuels. But how do you guys see that being the way of the future?
So Francis,
instead of
go ahead.
No, I'm trying to think of it as I'm speaking, but I think we can all have it on our houses, but I think the governments of the world should be able to put it to incentivize us to help, because I'd love to help. I'd love to be able to be someone who contributes to the grid that everybody else can also live off with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So Christiaan, before I go over to you, just for your comment on that, I just want to mention to you, Francis, I don't know if you've seen the report that was done by the International Energy Agency in April, I think, and they predicted that renewable capacity would increase by about 8% in 2022. And then they said that solar PV, I'm just reading off the report here, is forecast to account for 60% of the increase in global renewable capacity this year. They say they're going to commission about 190 gigawatt, a 25% gain from last year. So it would seem, many places in the world are in fact pushing headlong with regards to renewables, and that whole thing is actually beginning to happen. I know in the EU, for example, they just passed some legislation that new buildings are basically required to have solar on them. So, Christiaan or Nick?
No, thanks, Francis, for that. Yeah, like you say, and rightly so, we live in South Africa. It's a sunny country by default, and we've got all this space to utilize and effectively contribute from a small scale to a large scale. And an ideal world, or ideal South Africa, for me, how I envision it is if we could, each and every one, contribute with our own systems, be it if you've got a 2-bedroom house and you are able to have solar on your rooftop and export during the day when you're not at home, that excess energy into the grid and be compensated in a way that it at the moment maybe doesn't make sense. Like Nick said, if we're able to be compensated in a way that it would make financial sense for us, to invest in solar, that would have been the perfect scenario. But unfortunately, think about it this way: if each and every household and commercial property and utilizing vast areas in the Karoo without affecting the ecological aspect of it, or also from a cosmetic point of view, but also functional point of view, if you're able to harness solar energy as a renewable in South Africa and reduce the strain on the grid, that would have been perfect. But unfortunately, our problem is bigger than that. It's the financial problem that needs to be overcome. If we, each and every one of us, buy less electricity from the supplier, it's not going to solve the financial problem that we have. And this problem is something that unfortunately I can't answer. How are we going to solve that? I can only hope that we as a country are able to get incentivized for installing solar on our rooftops. Be incentivized for reducing that load on the grid, being greener, contributing to the world, to a world that we want to get away from fossil fuels. It all makes sense on paper, but unfortunately we have these stumbling blocks, which is a problem. And I really hope that we can get to a point where we can find a middle way to solve this without us being sort of penalized for solar, if that makes sense. And that's everyone's concern at the moment, is that we are forced to go solar because of our situation in the country. Maybe not forced, if you want, like Francis said, depending, it doesn't matter if he's living in South Africa or in Iceland, if solar is what he wants to have, he wants to contribute from his point of view in that way. And, if we're able to do that, that would be great. But unfortunately, the problem itself is bigger than this. And I really hope that we can solve it, that it makes sense for everyone.
Great stuff. So we are at the top of the hour, and I want to say, Christiaan, that flew past. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us. Just a quick question, imparting from you. Are you the most sorry, let me just do this here. My apologies, I was on mute there. So I just wanted to say that thank you very much for giving us your time. We're at the top of the hour. Can I just ask, where are you the most active on social media? Is it on LinkedIn? Is that where people can connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn. We've got our website, www.awpower.co.za. You can contact us there, either by telephone, email, but LinkedIn, all the socials, Facebook, even get in contact with us. I would suppose more than welcome. We are on LinkedIn at the moment. It is a platform, like you say, Peter, that is growing at a tremendous rate and is becoming the way forward. So yeah, please get in touch over LinkedIn. Feel free to get in touch. We are here to help. We are here to educate and advise people and solve problems, one step at a time.
Great stuff. Thank you, Christiaan. Thank you also for yourself, Francis and Nick, for popping up and asking your questions. You contributed to the conversation, and that's much appreciated. So we are going to continue these conversations around the broad theme of climate literacy and climate solutions in the weeks ahead. So please do follow me, and as these things go live, and you can connect with us and have these conversations. We have recorded this conversation, so once we have got that up, we'll actually put the link in the comments of this event, so you'll be able to see that, and of course we'll share that around social media as well. But thanks again, Christiaan. I appreciate all your insights, and everybody have a great Wednesday. Talk to you soon.